All right, well, right after I realized I finished the welfare video and realized that there was one more thing I wanted to talk about. Well, I guess two more things. I'm going to change the name of this video because I want to talk a little about subsidies, and I also want to talk a little bit about consumer and producer surplus when we're doing welfare calculations. Okay, so first off, let's talk a little bit about producer surplus when there's a shift, okay? So, you guys can see this. So let's take our normal. So we've got consumer surplus, producer surplus, okay? And your total welfare, just so we're aware, is all of this. Total welfare is consumer surplus plus producer surplus. I don't know if I mentioned that last time. Okay, so let's say we have a shift. Okay, we have a shock to the market, and let's say our supply shifts this way. Okay, actually, let me do it. Let's do it like this. Okay, so we have a new supply curve. So we have a new equilibrium. Okay, it's a little messy right there, so I'm going to draw another curve just right here. This is supply, this is demand, and then this is our new supply. Okay, I just drew the same graph a second time, just to make it a little bit clearer. So this is our new equilibrium. Okay. So now we have a new consumer surplus. We have our new producer surplus. And then this is our total welfare. So a lot of times you get this question, what happened to consumer surplus? What happened to producer surplus? Did it increase? Did it decrease? Etc., etc. Okay. So first of all, these questions can be kind of deceiving, and I recommend you be cautious with these questions, and I'll teach you a little trick at the end. So first of all, let's deal with the easiest one. What happens to total welfare? So total welfare used to be, I'm going to draw it with green, used to be right all of this, and now it's just this pink. Okay, so we lost this entire section. Okay, that was in total welfare, now it's gone. So we know total welfare is for sure decreasing. Okay, so it's decreasing. I think that's pretty obvious to see. Let me clear it up a little bit. Okay, so we know total welfare is decreasing. Now what's happening to consumer surplus? Now we're going to approach this a little bit differently than you normally would. When we calculate consumer surplus, when we find the area of a triangle, how do we do it? It's base times height divided by 2. So when we're looking at this consumer surplus, this one up here, what the heck? I would not like to clean my Mac. Okay, so we're looking at this one right here. We're going to use this as the height, okay, and this as the base, okay? So it's base times height. It's equal to consumer surplus divided by 2, but the divide by 2 is not going to help us that much. I'm going to redraw this because I can't write well. Base times height divided by 2. Okay, so on the change, what happens to the height? It's fixated at this point and it shrinks. So we know for sure that height decreases. What happens to base? Base also is fixated on the axis and then shrinks in. So base is also decreasing. So base times height divided by 2, we know that consumer surplus for sure has to be going down. Does that make sense to everyone? It's because both of these are decreasing. Okay? So we know, so if total welfare is equal to consumer surplus plus producer surplus, consumer surplus is also decreasing. So we know that's true. Okay. Now the last one, which I think is probably the hardest. We're going to erase this a little bit, clear it up, and redraw it. There it is. Okay, just redrawing the same graph. Okay. Stick with me. So this one is definitely the hardest, producer surplus. And this is why I break it down into base times height. So let's look at the base and let's look at the height. So what's happening to the, we'll deal with base first of producer surplus. So it used to be this line. That used to be the base, and now it is this line. So base is for sure shrinking because it's fixated right here. It's fixated on that point. So as such, we know the base is for sure decreasing. Now, what about the height? This is tricky. So the height originally was right here, okay? And now it's right here. So both points are moving, and they're both fixated, or they're not, none of them are fixated. So we don't know if it's for sure increasing or decreasing. It's because it's a literal shift of both endpoints. So the height is actually ambiguous. Okay, do we see why that is? The height's ambiguous. So if we did base times height divided by 2 is producer surplus. Producer surplus is actually ambiguous in this case. Even though it looks like it's getting smaller, it's ambiguous because your height is ambiguous. So in this case, producer surplus is ambiguous. Okay, and anytime we get one of these questions, when it says as a total welfare, consumer surplus, and producer surplus, unless it's perfectly elastic or perfectly inelastic, two of these, total welfare you can always know, and then one of the two, consumer or producer surplus, you will for sure know, and the other one will be ambiguous. We're not sure. You'll never know both consumer and producer surplus, the increase, unless it's perfectly inelastic or perfectly elastic. Okay, let's do one more. We'll do an increase. I just realized I'm going to have to make another video because I think we're going to run out of time here. About subsidies, and there's another thing I remembered that I also want to cover that's important. Okay. So let's say it's an increase in demand. So this is our new demand. So we used to be right here, and now we're right here. Okay, so let's do it. So first of all, total welfare is increasing. Do we see why that is? It's because this whole area did not exist before. Okay, so that's increasing. What about producer surplus? Producer surplus used to be right here. We'll do base times height, and now it's right here. So the height is for sure increasing, and the base is also for sure increasing because it's fixated on one point and the other one's increasing. And then, so we know producer surplus is increasing. So you could probably guess it by now, but the other one, like we said, it will probably be ambiguous, and we're going to prove that. So let me clear this up a little bit. I got to hustle. Get on the time. So what happened to consumer surplus? Here's consumer surplus, the original. So the base is increasing. What about the height? The height goes from here to here. So as you can see, it's not fixated on one point, so it's ambiguous. As such, consumer surplus is ambiguous. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. But the main point to know is total welfare, you can always figure out if it's increasing or decreasing. Producer surplus or consumer surplus, one will be ambiguous and the other one will be increasing or decreasing as long as they are not perfectly inelastic or perfectly elastic. If that's the case, you can determine. And that's all. Adam out.